This video took me over 5 years to finish, together with the microwave metal melting video I published last year. Today I'm gonna show you different ways how to make a microwave kiln. Smaller kilns can be used for things like glass fusing. And the big ones are great to burn out molds for your Lost Wax, Lost PLA or Lost Resin projects. Not only I will demonstrate in detail how to use a microwave kiln to burn out molds with great success, I will also introduce you to these. These are flask-less molds, molds that don't use any metal flasks. And they're great if you want to use an ordinary vacuum cleaner to vacuum cast them. The techniques demonstrated in these videos have a potential to shake the future of small-scale hobby metal melting industry. Throughout this video, I'll showcase 5 metal casting examples. I'll show you how I use my microwave kiln to burn out molds in detail. I'll use the microwave to melt metals and a vacuum cleaner to vacuum cast those flaskless molds. We'll be making our microwave kilns from ceramic fiber blanket. Whenever you work with that material, make sure to wear a respirator. And it's also a good idea to wear a respirator when you use your kilns or melt metals.
I'm using 25mm ceramic fiber sheet. Some cheaper knives will get dull quickly when cutting ceramic fiber, so keep that sharpener on hand. In this method of making kilns, we're going to cut a few squares of ceramic fiber and then use a round object like a lid to remove the excess material. I'm gonna wrap the ceramic fiber circle with some Kapton tape.
Kapton tape.
Kapton tape is a high temperature resistant tape and it comes in different sizes. When buying Kapton tape, make sure to pay attention to long-term temperature resistance. It should be at least 250 degrees Celsius or higher.
I drilled a hole with a large diamond hole saw. And if you want, you can cut the hole by hand. It doesn't have to be round. If you're making a tall kiln, another way to cut a hole is by using a coin bank. You can just make a hole saw out of it.
We'll be using a sanding glass, and for that you'll need a piece of glass. If you can't find a piece of glass, think cheap photo frames and mirrors. The bad thing about photo frame glass is that it's very thin, so it's easy to break. So it's better to choose a thicker piece of glass, that way it will last you longer.
We need to stop the glass from moving. One of the ways to do it is by wrapping the table with a cling film. Another way to do it, which is actually my preferred method, is by using a hot glue gun. And when you're done, you can just use some alcohol to remove the glue. You'll need another piece of glass for sanding. A suction cup mobile phone holder can come handy. Alternatively, you can use a drinking glass with a flat bottom. We'll pour some silicon carbide onto the glass. It's the same silicon carbide we'll be using later in the video. Add some water and start sanding. Alternatively, you can just use a sandpaper if you prefer.
We'll use the sanding glass to mash the layers together nice and smooth. For sanding, you can use boric acid solution or ordinary water.
If you want to use boric acid solution, this is how you can make it. We're gonna pour some water in a jug and we're gonna weight it.
We'll add between 5 and 10% of boric acid. So whatever the water weight was, in this example 696 grams, we'll add 10% of boric acid, so that's 69 grams.
We'll heat it up until boric acid dissolves.
The reason I said to use between 5 and 10% of boric acid is because if you use more than 10%, the boric acid will start to recrystallize rapidly and your spray bottle can clog up. That said, you can use more boric acid if you want to, just don't put it in a spray bottle.
Now we can use the sanding glass to make the ceramic fiber nice and flat. Spray some water or boric acid solution onto the glass and onto the ceramic fiber and start mashing those layers together. If you choose to use boric acid solution instead of water, I recommend wetting the ceramic fiber properly before sanding, including the hole you drilled. The next step I call microwave drying. We're gonna put the donut into the microwave and microwave it until most of the water evaporates. I also made the base the same way. After sanding it on top of the glass with boric acid water, it was microwave dried. If there's a lot of water present, I like to wipe it up with a paper towel.
Once your ceramic fiber looks and feels dry, you're done. Don't microwave for longer just in case. That can only cause your microwave to overheat. When microwaves overheat, the power is cut off by a thermal cutoff switch. Your microwave will have no power and plugging and unplugging won't do anything.
This microwave has two thermal cutoff switches, one on top of the magnetron and the other on top of the oven's cavity. The switch on top of the magnetron will turn off when it reaches 180 degrees Celsius. This switch is a normally closed switch. In other words, to activate it or to break the connection, it needs to be pressed, and for that we have this little button.
But who does the pressing? A microwave elf? Well, it's actually this little piece of metal that sits on top of the button.
When heated, it will bend, that way pressing the button. And when your magnetron will cool down enough, the switch will also cool down and the connection will be restored.
So if your microwave overheats, in 99% of times you just need to wait until it cools down and then it will work again.
If the ceramic fiber has been soaked in boric acid solution, blowtorching it will make it much harder. Even if you didn't use boric acid, I still recommend blowtorching the fiber.
Next step is very important. If during the blowtorching you burn the edges of the Kapton tape, make sure to cut off that burnt part. As I demonstrated in the microwave metal melting video, charred Kapton tape can start to arc. Arcing is when you put a sharp metallic object in the microwave and it produces sparks.
Because of arcing, the Kapton tape will heat up in that one point and it will keep heating up and smoldering.
The same thing can happen with Kapton tape. It will start to arc and keep smoldering. And that can lead to something like this.
You'll need silicon carbide. You can use medium, fine or powder grit. Coarse grit is probably not the best choice. Throughout this video, I'll be using medium as well as fine grit silicon carbide. I used the brush to wet the walls with boric acid and water mixture, the same we used before. I poured it over the silicon carbide and mixed it a little bit. Now we can pour off the liquid. And of course make sure that the boric acid water is nice and warm. Now the silicon carbide will look and feel like wet sand. I find that the best tool for the job is your finger. At least that's what I was told during my prostate exam. When all the walls are covered, take your time to go around and make sure silicon carbide is tightly pressed together. To cure the silicon carbide, we're just gonna microwave it. I like to put it in a microwave for around a minute without covering first. Then I cover it with ceramic fiber sheet and microwave it until it turns glowing red.
If silicon carbide doesn't turn glowing red, which can sometimes happen if you use boric acid together with a coarser grit silicon carbide, here's one thing you can do.
Heat the silicon carbide with a blowtorch in one spot. Then cover it and keep microwaving. Oh yeah!
And by the way, I know I'm not wearing gloves and I'm playing with fire, but some of this footage was recorded 3 to 5 years ago.
I'll make better mistakes tomorrow.
Here's one of the kilns after microwaving it for the first time. The silicon carbide has hardened, but it's not quite there yet. We need to wet it one more time with boric acid and water solution. I sprayed it all over the silicon carbide. We'll microwave it one more time.
An alternative to boric acid is sodium silicate, aka water glass. I'm using 37% water glass solution. Anything between 37 and 40% should give you similar results.
This time you'll need to weight your silicon carbide. We'll add between 8 and 10% of water glass. So if the weight of the silicon carbide was 60, that means I need to add 6 grams of water glass. To make the mixture easier to apply, you can add some water. 10% works good. Mix it properly and then apply just like before when we used boric acid solution. And just like before, when you're done, stick it in the microwave. Usually you don't need to add more water glass, it sticks very good. Sometimes the water glass can bubble up in a few spots. The walls will have a few little mountains on them.
That's normal, it's usually caused by water added to sodium silicate. To prevent it, you could skip adding the water or reduce the quantity used, but then the mixture will be much drier and will be more difficult to apply it. And it can also depend on the grit size you use and the strength of the water glass. If you're working on a hot summer day, be aware that sodium silicate can start hardening rapidly. Putting the water glass in the fridge before you work can help.
The next step will depend on how you want your kiln to look like. In this example, I used 2 sheets of ceramic fiber to close the top of the kiln. I just used Kapton tape to join everything together. No boric acid is needed. You can use the circle cut from ceramic fiber earlier to add some extra insulation from inside. And for the base, we'll cover one side of ceramic fiber with Kapton tape. Next we'll make these ceramic fiber and Kapton tape pillows that will act as feet. And then we just attach it with some more Kapton tape. Now let's heat up the kiln for the first time. First time you use it, there will be some smoke coming from the boric acid burning. That's normal. At this point you could already use your kiln, but I recommend not to. There are a few more things we can do. Don't be afraid to sand your kiln at final stages of kiln making process. I'm not saying you have to, I'm saying you can. In this example I used some boric acid solution to sand the kiln again. It did turn grey from sanding silicon carbide. It does not affect the kiln in any way. After microwave drying, this is how the kiln looks like. Are we done? Well, it's up to you. If you want, you can dry sand the surfaces to make them even smoother. If you do it, make sure to use a blowtorch to lock those layers in. And the final step is covering the surfaces with kiln wash. Kiln wash will protect ceramic fiber and will dramatically prevent any potential dust formation from ceramic fiber. If you can't find kiln wash, here's one way to make your own. For this recipe I used kaolin clay, aluminum oxide and optional some pigment. I mixed 50% of kaolin with 50% of aluminum oxide and I added a dash of pigment. And then I gave it a shake. When you're done applying kiln wash, just microwave dry it. There are different ways you can make your kilns. For glass fusing projects I prefer a 3-piece kiln because you can easily center your glass pieces.
Before I show you another way how to make microwave kilns, which is actually my preferred method of making burnout kilns, let's try out the smaller kiln we just made and do some bottle glass fusing.
I filled up 3 bottles with a cheap plaster. When it was set, I cut out different size holes with a diamond hole saw. Plaster can make the drilling process a bit safer and neater. I spent around 2 hours fusing together different size circles. I microwaved it for 3 minutes the first time. Let's see how it came out. This one is quite ugly, so I did a few more. I'm fusing the glass on top of the ceramic fiber sheet that's designed for glass fusing. If we don't use it, the glass will stick to the base. I have 5 pieces that came out pretty nice. I traced around one of the stones with a pencil, imported the photo in Fusion 360 and designed a jewelry around it.
We'll cast it in brass baby later in the video, but now let's make a large burnout kiln.
We'll make silicon carbide rings with these 3D printed molds. Just like before, you need to weight silicon carbide. In this example I use 70 grams, but you can use way less. We'll add between 8 and 10% of sodium silicate. So just like before, the only difference, we do not add water. And by the way, boric acid won't work, so you have to use water glass. We will fill the mold step by step and use 3D printed tools to press the silicon carbide nice and tight. When that's done, put the mold in the freezer for at least 1 hour. As you can see, I already made 2 rings earlier. Now carefully open up the mold. Put your frozen rings in preheated oven and turn off the oven, and in 20 minutes your rings should be ready. You can tidy up the rings by sanding if necessary.
The next step is optional. You can harden the rings. You can make them much stronger. In the microwave metal melting video, this step was very important when we made our own crucibles. In this case, it's not as important, but it can still be done, and I'll explain the benefits in a second.
We'll wrap the rings in ceramic fiber strip. If needed, you can split the sheet in half so it's easier to wrap it around.
Alright, partner. Keep on rolling, baby.
And then I use 2 rubber bands to hold it together. Put it in a microwave and microwave until glowing red. Rubber bands will break and shoot away from the ceramic fiber. Remove the rings, but be careful, they can still be hot. Scrape off remaining ceramic fiber.
The scraping action can produce a lot of ceramic fiber dust, so make sure to wear a respirator. It's probably even the most significant dust producing step in the entire kiln making process, so it might be even wise to do it outside.
If your rings look like mine, that means you succeeded in hardening them.
I am your father.
If they're not covered in white patches and they look pretty much the same, you probably didn't heat them up for long enough. Overheating is also not desirable because that could fuse the rings together.
We're gonna wrap the rings in ceramic fiber sheet.
This is where you might benefit from using hardened rings. On more than one occasion, I have broke a ring or two when making large microwave kilns, because you will put some pressure on rings when wrapping ceramic fiber around them. A bit too much pressure can cause the ring to break. Hardened rings are stronger, so it's less likely to happen. Once the rings are inside of the kiln, it doesn't really matter whether they're hardened or not.
The thickness of this microwave kiln will be approximately 50 mm or two 25 mm sheets. At the time I was shooting this video, I only had one microwave. Now I have two and the second one is slightly larger, so I might even make my kiln thicker. And just like before, Kapton tape it is. And the rest is pretty much the same. I made the base and the lid the same way, more or less. I actually ended up making my kiln a little bit too tall, so I had to make it shorter. I sanded both sides of the chamber, the lid and the base with boric acid solution. After microwave drying everything, I used a blowtorch to harden the surfaces. And I sanded it a few more times. I drilled a hole. That's where aluminum tray will go that will catch the molten plastic. Because the chamber, the lid and the base are not perfectly round, you might find that there's a position where they fit together the best. It doesn't really matter, but if it pleases your eyes, you can find that position, mark it with a permanent marker and then cover with a Kapton tape so it doesn't rub off.
The last step would be covering the surfaces with a kiln wash. I'll do it later in the video so I can demonstrate what happens if you don't use it.
In this example, I'm gonna do some Lost PLA casting. I'll cast this funnel in aluminum.
And here's a tip. If you do a Lost PLA casting, make sure to use a translucent or transparent natural PLA filament. Sure, you'll see me using colored PLA, but that's because I didn't have the other one. Natural translucent PLA burns out much cleaner than your colored PLA. But is there actually a noticeable difference? Well, it depends on what you print, the brand of the filament, and the additives they use. There was this one object that I was trying to cast, but I kept failing over and over again, and I couldn't understand why. I thought maybe there was a problem with the temperature, so I increased the temperature of the metal. I also increased the temperature of the mold, but it didn't solve the problem. Then I thought maybe there's a problem with vacuum, so I bought a new vacuum cleaner, but that did not solve the issue. Because I had done it in past successfully, I checked the videos to see what was I doing differently. And the only difference was the PLA used. In the past I used translucent PLA, where now I used PLA plus, a green PLA plus material. So I switched the filament to translucent PLA and that solved the issue.
I used some cheese wax to attach the funnel to the base. I brush some Vaseline into the feet to make sure they don't break off. I mix some dental plaster of Paris with sand. I use the reciprocating saw to shake out some of the bubbles from the investment. I sprayed some wetting agent or debubblizer into the funnel's threads. And I shake the mold again to hopefully get rid of the bubbles. After 1 hour and 30 minutes, I opened up the mold.
Before we put our molds inside of the microwave kiln, they need to be dried. Putting wet molds inside of the microwave kiln will make ceramic fiber wet, and it's not what you want. I used to use oven, but these days I use an air fryer because it's cheaper and faster.
I put it in an air fryer at 160 degrees Celsius for 1 hour and 30 minutes.
What's the difference between an ordinary burnout kiln and a microwave burnout kiln? Obviously there are a lot of differences, but one that stands out the most is that there are microwaves present. Microwaves can crack the mold or cause burnout issues. The way you prevent it is by wrapping the mold in aluminum foil, that way blocking the microwaves. But it's not always a problem. It depends on few things. It depends on how long you dry it and the temperature in the oven or the air fryer. It depends on the investment you use and also the material your object is made of. Let's break these points down. So instead of using an air fryer for 1.5 hours at 160 degrees Celsius, I could have done that plus additional time at maximum heat, which is 205 degrees in my air fryer. That would probably be enough to prevent the mold from cracking and not needing aluminum foil. So that means we can just use an air fryer for longer and forget about the foil, right? Well, it depends. Think about the foil as a tool. Maybe you don't want to dry your molds in an air fryer to the point where the plastic starts to melt. Maybe you don't want to use your big oven to dry a few molds for 3 or 4 hours. It might be cheaper to just run the oven for 1.5 hours and then transfer the molds to the microwave kiln. And some investments might not like microwaves, especially when they're wet. Most of molds that are made from cheap plasters that I use can be transferred to microwave kilns without using aluminum foil once the PLA starts to soften, once it starts to melt a little bit. Which brings us to the third point. It depends on the material the model you're going to burn out is made of. Wax? No problem. PLA? Great. Resin, on the other hand, is a different story, because resin, when microwaved, can become brittle.
Here I have some castable resin that's been cured in UV chamber. Let's see what happens if I microwave it. Only 30 seconds of microwaving made it brittle.
That can create burnout quality issues. I'm not saying it always will, but it's something to keep in mind. So these are all the reasons why you might cover the mold with aluminum foil. You will also want to make some holes in aluminum foil so the mold could breathe.
There's many tools that can be used to make holes.
I like to use this pin roller that you can 3D print. Just get a lot of pins, cut off the heads and glue them into the holes. And then you put it onto an ordinary paint roller holder, and I secured it with a zip tie. And by the way, you'll find files to molds and other items I speak about in this video on my Patreon page, YouTube's member page, or Printables store. And as a bonus, you can use it to stimulate hair growth and finally stop balding.
It only takes a few seconds to transform your aluminum foil to aluminum mesh. Alright, let's wrap the mold. I will put the mold on top of aluminum foil that will help to catch the molten plastic. You can make these trays with this 3D printed tool. It roughly takes a minute to make each tray. Of course you don't need this 3D printed tool, but it makes life a little bit easier. So this is one way to make a tray. You get these sharp, saw-like edges. I like to fold the edges to avoid any possible arcing issues. And by the way, it's best to use foil that's not too thin. I usually spend 10 or 15 minutes making these trays and then I stack them up for the future use. Okay, so the mold goes on top and now we can start the burnout.
So how do you control your microwave kiln? If you just run it non-stop, it will be a disaster. Well, actually it's quite simple. We use one of these, an interval timer. We can use it to turn the microwave on or off at certain times. And this interval timer that is also available for UK and US has an option to schedule your burnouts. There are also smart switches with interval timers. I don't use them anymore, I only stick to this. Unfortunately, it only works with analog microwaves, not digital. Because if you unplug and plug back in an analog microwave, it will keep working, where the digital one will not. It might sound like a complicated process, but I can assure you it's not. It works so good, it's ridiculous. For example, when I burn out my PLA molds, I don't need to use my thermometer. I know the burnout schedule and it works like a dream. So basically I just run a cycle 1 minute on and 6 minutes off, and I do it for a few hours. The temperature slowly rises until the mold has been burned out. Of course, it's not the same cycle for all the molds. In some cases you'll need to increase the temperature and you do it by changing the cycle. So instead of using 1.6, later in a burnout process you will change it to 1.4 or 1.2 or something like that. And that way you'll increase the temperature. For example, when doing Lost PLA casting with this 6-cup mold, it can be burned out only by using 1.6 cycle. By the end of the burnout, the mold will reach 430-ish degrees Celsius, which is enough to burn out PLA and cast metal. But why 1 minute on and 6 minutes off? It's just the cycle that I use. When I first started experimenting, I used different cycles, but after many experiments, I found out that 1.6 works pretty good, and I use it on both of my microwaves with different kilns. It doesn't mean that it's gonna be same cycle for you, but that's what I use.
So I set my interval timer to 1 minute on and 6 minutes off. In approximately 2.5 hours I checked on it to see the progress. The PLA was already dripping out, so I knew that it's safe to take off the foil, so that's what I did. I kept running the same cycle 1 minute on and 6 minutes off for another hour. This is the very first time I used this brand new kiln and I actually missed the perfect timing when to remove the aluminum foil. There's nothing wrong, it's just that I like to remove the foil before the PLA starts to burn. I'll show you examples in a second. So I turned the mold upside down and changed the cycle to 1.4. I didn't have to change the cycle, I just did this time, I don't know why. And here I'm just checking the temperature of the kiln. It's around 76 degrees Celsius. The mold has been burned out. Total burnout time was probably around 4.5 hours. I'm gonna melt some aluminum and we'll try to cast the funnel. While I was melting the metal, the mold cooled down to approximately 350 degrees Celsius. And by the way, whenever I do Lost PLA casting, my molds never reach 500 degrees Celsius. By the time I cast metal, they're usually between 300 and 400 degrees. Alright, let's check out the mold. As we can see, there's no funnel. The mold is empty, because aluminum doesn't flow easily. Which brings us closer to the chapter about vacuum casting with a vacuum cleaner. But before that, let's burn out another mold and go into more detail. This mold didn't have any feet, that's why I cut out ventilation holes. It's just another way to do it. I scratched the mold with a wire brush. It's something that I used to do back in a day. I thought that it could help with a vacuum. Honestly, I doubt that there's any measurable difference, but I still do it occasionally, because why not? And this time I'm using my old microwave kiln. And as you can see, there's plenty of space for ventilation. That's what the feet are for.
I'm just gonna make sure there's no arcing issues.
And by the way, there's almost never any arcing issues.
I don't hear anything, so we're good. It's already 4 p.m. 16:00, so it's a bit too late for me to burn it out today. I prefer to burn out my molds in the morning. So what I'm gonna do, I have the microwave prepared. I'm gonna use my smart switch to control the microwave. It will turn on at around 6 o'clock in the morning and it will start running the loop, the interval cycle. And the cycle is 1 minute on and 6 minutes off. And I'm gonna run that cycle for around 3 hours or 3 hours and 20 minutes. Save. Here we go. Okay, so it's now exactly 9:20. So that means the microwave has been running for 3 hours and 20 minutes. So I already can smell the plastic. Normally I would wear a mask at this point, and the windows were open. I just shut them now so you could hear me better. So I'm gonna remove the foil, flip the mold upside down, and I'm gonna continue running the same cycle for 40 minutes or an hour. We'll see.
Just like before, the plastic in the tray is already burning. It's alright, but I think we can do better. So write down your burnout schedule and next time open up the kiln half an hour earlier. You can see the perfect timing when to remove the foil in this other example. The plastic has dripped into the tray, but it hasn't started to burn yet. It's good for two reasons. First, why burn it if you can remove it? And second, you can reuse this plastic straight from the kiln to make new items. In this example, I made a thumb screw by using a silicone mold and a screw. I'll show you more examples in future videos. Okay, back to burning out the mold.
Let's check the progress. The mold has been burned out. According to this, it's 400 degrees Celsius on the top. So at this point, I have not done anything. The microwave has burned out the mold automatically. The cycle was 1 minute on, 6 minutes off, and as you see, in 4 hours and 20 minutes since it turned on, the mold has been burned out. The only thing I did was obviously remove the foil and flip the mold upside down. Well, actually, there's one more thing we need to do, At some point during the burnout, you need to top up the timer. Otherwise, it's gonna run out and the burnout will stop. I used to jam my timer, but I only did it for a few weeks. I stopped doing it because it's a great safety feature. The thing is, life can surprise you, and the last thing I want is have my microwave running while I'm not at home.
I use 3, 6, 9 and 12 cup funnels. They go together with these 3D printed molds.
We'll be using these funnels for vacuum casting, and the reason I give you the sizes in cups is because these funnels are from Mocha Pot, and this is a 12 cup Mocha Pot. Obviously you can buy these funnels separately, you don't have to buy a Mocha Pot. I recommend buying aluminum funnels because stainless steel are more expensive and I find that the sizes don't really match the aluminum ones.
So when you make your mold, it will fit into the funnel.
Because I mostly use dental plaster of Paris, construction plaster and similar investments to make my molds, I print out these around 3% bigger because the plaster will shrink. So it might not fit in the funnel while it's still wet, but it will once you burn it out. So this is just something to keep in mind. Depending on investment used, you can print these bigger if necessary. And speaking about investments, some proper professional investments might not be suitable for flask-less molds. I don't really have a lot of experience using them, but I do remember trying out one of those investments and the results were not great. The molds kept cracking all the time. It seemed like that investment was made to be used with flasks, not with flaskless molds.
So here's my simple vacuum casting setup. Have an ordinary vacuum cleaner from Lidl, 3D printed adapter, a silicone hose. So this tube goes through the table into the tray and then we put the funnel on top. And it just holds there on its own. I'll show you how to make the silicone sleeve in a second. Because the mold is porous and there is no metal flask in the way, an ordinary vacuum cleaner can do miracles. I waited for the mold to cool down. That way I don't need to use gloves. I'm gonna roll down the silicone sleeve so it's ready for the next mold. So here we have another crack-free mold. And I did few of these funnels. This mold doesn't have any feet because I accidentally grabbed the wrong mold, the one I normally use for lost resin casting. And I also forgot to carve out the ventilation holes. So as you can see, vacuum works. But there is a way to take it to the next level. If you want, you can increase the tube size. So instead of using a silicone hose, I'll be using a metal tube from a vacuum cleaner. After drilling the hole in the funnel, I use sugru to marry both pieces together. New tube means new hole in the table, as well as a new tray. And I used a 3D printed adapter to attach it to a vacuum cleaner, since this metal tube is from a different vacuum cleaner. Let's see how the funnel turned out. The funnel is for these bottles that I like to use. The bottles come in different sizes and they have all the same threads, so this funnel will fit all types of bottles. The funnel I used before got jammed all the time because of the narrow opening. This one is a game changer. If you want to 3D print your own funnel, links in description.
Let's make the silicone sleeve. Any ideas what it's made of?
You can 3D print these sleeve guides, but before you do it, have a look around the house, you might find something that fits into the funnel. And here's a tip, make sure to get an adult size swimming cup, that way you'll get more material. If the funnel has sharp edges, I like to cover it with Kapton tape. And then we just wrap around the silicone sleeve from a swimming hat. And we secure it with a Kapton tape. We'll take a cut of piece and we'll loop it and twist it until we get an appropriate size silicone rubber band. And it just goes on top of the sleeve and then we roll it down. Another option is to buy some silicone rubber bands and use those instead. I like to drill a few larger holes in the funnel just in case it helps with vacuum. That's all there is to it.
But how come the silicone sleeve can take such a high temperatures? I mean, we're pouring hot metal into the mold. That's hot. Well, there are a few reasons. By the time I pour metal, my molds are usually between 300 and 400 degrees Celsius. On rare occasions it might reach closer to 500 degrees. And believe it or not, the silicone sleeve can take it. But it also can depend on investment used. Second reason is the investment. If you use plaster of Paris type of material, it just doesn't conduct heat very good. You will notice that different investments or the way they're mixed can conduct heat differently. For example, investments that are more dense tend to be more problematic, if you will. In other words, if you would try to use this sleeve with a metal flask, the results could be very different.
Here you can see two sleeves, a brand new and a used one.
The first time or first couple of times you use your sleeve, there will be some smoke from all the additives and pigments burning away. That is to be expected. It's time for another metal casting example. This time 2 metals to make a toothpaste squeezer.
I'm gonna cast this bolt in brass. The mold has a slot for a rubber band if you need it. For this mold I used dental plaster of Paris mixed with some sand. This time I didn't use any foil. I baked the mold in the air fryer for longer until the PLA started to soften. The second part of the toothpaste squeezer will be cast in aluminum. This time I'm using 12 cup mold. So you can get an idea what size objects can be cast in a 12 cup mold. This time, instead of using silicone sleeve, I used aluminum foil. I use aluminum foil in situations when there's a crack in the mold, or when I'm afraid that the mold could crack. For example, when the model is too close to the walls of the mold. I made this toothpaste squeezer almost 1 year ago, and I use it all the time. Well, obviously not with brand new tubes of toothpaste.
I'm new to Lost resin casting. I was advised to use a professional investment, an investment that can withstand the burnout of the resin, because the resin is not like wax or PLA, it doesn't drip out of the mold. Instead, you need to burn it out at higher temperatures until it turns into gas. So if you use the wrong kind of investment, that burnout process and turning into gas can crack the mold, or you can experience burnout quality issues. So using a good strong investment is the key. But something inside me was pulling towards the alternative, because this video is all about the alternative ways to do things. This is the cheapest construction plaster I have ever tried to make my molds.
Elegoo sent me this Mars 4 9K resin printer.
I don't do printer reviews, but all I can say, if I would have to send it back, I would get the same printer because I like it. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check it out. And I also want to thank Liqcreate for letting me try out this wax castable resin. Links in description.
I downloaded open source ring from Thingiverse user DJ Splitter Pro. I'll leave a link in description. I printed the ring and washed it in some alcohol. I removed the supports and cured the ring a little bit more in my homemade UV chamber. I used cheese wax to make some sprues. The investment for this mold cost me approximately 0.02 cents. No sand or additives were used. Sometimes it's possible to remove the sprue. Now how cool is that? After drying the mold in an air fryer, I heated it up until foil started to melt or crumble. It's a good indicator that the mold has reached at least 500 degrees Celsius. And I kept heating it up until it reached 600 degrees Celsius. I'm gonna cast the ring in copper. And here's some slow motion metal casting. I poured another ring, but this time instead of using construction plaster I used a high-grade gypsum cement, UltraCal 30. So first, cheap construction plaster. And then UltraCal. And by the way, both molds did crack, but it was one of those cracks that disappeared when the mold cooled down. Time to wash the car. I used Instamorph multiple plastic to hold the ring in place while I work on it. First we have Ultracal ring. It's not perfect, but I think it came out pretty nice. The construction plaster ring has some porosity. I'm not a metal casting expert, especially with copper. I have only done a few pieces, but I think I poured it a little bit too hot. Other than that, I think it's not bad. Here's the jewelry I designed earlier. Cheese wax and cheap construction plaster. This was actually one of my earlier attempts to burn out resin. I was still figuring things out. I removed the foil a bit too early, and I only heated up the mold to 500 degrees Celsius. I'm gonna cast the jewelry in brass. The cast is not perfect, but I do like the way it looks. I like that oxidation. So instead of trying to cast another piece of jewelry, I decided to use it. I like the effect of the drilled glass. Those white waves in the glass are a result of cutting the circles with a diamond hole saw. I wanted to keep testing the construction plaster, so I designed the ring and it was printed in Liqcreate's wax castable resin. I scheduled the burnout to start at 3 o'clock in the morning. Just like before, I removed the foil a bit too early. I should have waited until it started to melt. This was a perfect opportunity to demonstrate one last time the effectiveness of the vacuum cleaner vacuum casting. So if we don't use vacuum, we get a very nice invisible ring. Another benefit of using a vacuum cleaner is that you can suck out any ashes. Now it's not always the best thing to do and results can vary, but it's a tool that can be used. The sleeve is overlapping so you can't see the vacuum from this angle. So I did 2 rings, one in brass and the other in aluminum. So this is the brass ring. And here's aluminum. And this is how they look like before sanding. The aluminum ring I only cleaned up a little bit to see how it looks. I spent a bit more time on brass ring, but I didn't sand the holes. I actually don't know what's the best way to do it. So if you can suggest what's the best way to sand those tiny holes, I'm all ears, because I wanna do this ring again in the future, but in silver.
You know what's the benefit of taking years to finish a video? I can show you before and after.
This footage is already 3 years old, where I made one of my large microwave kilns. It was made pretty much the same, but I did add some boric acid on the outside and I used the oven to dry it. I actually think oven drying works better than microwave drying, but I didn't do it this time because there are some downsides. More on that later. So here's the same kiln you just saw me make after 3 years of use. The Kapton tape has become dark. I actually believe it could be the adhesive that has darkened, but I'm not 100% sure. I delayed the maintenance of the kiln because I knew I wanted to show it on the camera. In fact, I might have let it go a bit too much. The chamber is actually in very good condition. You will need to reapply the kiln wash on top of the base and the lid every now and then as part of the maintenance. In general, this kiln has plenty life in it.
There was one cracked ring. If I remember correctly, I think I dropped the kiln.
And here's the new kiln after around 30 times of use, give or take. Remember that I did not use kiln wash. You can see that some parts of the kiln have become soft. Adding more boric acid would have helped, but only to the point. Rings are in perfect condition. And the base is hard in the center but softish on the sides.
So that's why it's important to use kiln wash, so we can cover all those fibers. That way your microwave kiln will last you much longer and it will be safer, because the ceramic fiber will be covered, at least in those parts.
As long as you do some maintenance every now and then, this kiln will last you for years.
So why did I use Kapton tape? I tried different methods. I find that with Kapton tape you can build kilns fast, it's cheap, and it works. This is actually my second kiln making video. The first one I published back in 2019. It's no more searchable in YouTube, but it's unlisted, so you can still watch it if you want. Links in description.
In that video I did not use Kapton tape, I used the sodium silicate or the water glass to make this outside shell. There was only one issue, and I did demonstrate it in the video. I said that the sodium silicate can start to arc and heat up from the outside. The solution was blowtorching the sodium silicate to change its properties, and it worked. At least I thought so.
After publishing the video and using my large microwave kiln for many months, it developed a problem. It started to heat up in one spot from the outside, despite the fact that I did the blowtorching. So there was definitely an issue. So that's the reason why the video is unlisted, because this new way of making kilns is much better.
I have also used refractory cement to cover my kilns and metal melting chambers. It works, but it's not as microwave friendly material as Kapton tape. In other words, it can absorb a lot of microwaves and heat up from the outside as well. And here you can see me microwave drying refractory cement. If you do decide to use refractory cement, the best way to do it is brush it on.
Because this is not a pizza oven you're making. If you're gonna use a lot of refractory cement, it's gonna absorb lots of microwaves and your kiln will not be efficient. In the microwave metal melting video, I showed you how different materials can affect the efficiency of your chambers as well as kilns.
And here's the footage from 2019. I did not have a proper vacuum casting table. I just used a stool that was flipped upside down with a piece of floor tile on top of it. And here's one of my first successful kilns I made in 2018. It was also made from ceramic fiber, but it was shredded.
Who cares? So you saw me scheduling the burnout at 3 o'clock in the morning. You might think it's crazy to do something like this while you're sleeping. Obviously I don't do it in my kitchen. I do it in the only safe space that I have, which is the balcony. There's a smoke detector on the balcony, smoke detectors in the rooms, I have a fire extinguisher, and so on. The point is there are layers of safety, and I wear a respirator when I check on my microwave kilns or do metal melting. Let me do a little demonstration. What would happen if the loop timer would fail, or I would fail to set it correctly, and instead of the microwave turning on and off, it would run 35 minutes straight.
I'm just gonna put a piece of a burnout mold in the microwave kiln To simulate the loop timer failing or a user error, I'm gonna run my microwave for 35 minutes straight, which is maximum duration. Alright, so there is some smoke. The kiln is very hot. It's almost 200 degrees. That's why I said it was important to make sure the Kapton tape can withstand at least 250 degrees Celsius. The Kapton tape has become even darker. And to be honest, I'm not actually sure if it's the tape or the adhesive that has become dark.
So as you can see, if this or this would fail, the kiln would be alright. Of course this mold was empty. If we would burn out PLA that fast, there would be a lot of smoke. But other than that, it would be the same. And of course it's my microwave, my kiln and 35-minute timer. And if I really wanted, I could use 2 interval timers and then just sync them together. So if one fails, there's always a backup. So those are the reasons why I schedule my burnouts at early hours in the morning, because it works better for my daily routine and there's layers of safety and experience. I do not recommend scheduling your burnouts at night until you build up some experience and have proper safety procedures in place. So as I said before, I used to use my kitchen's oven to dry my kilns. I don't do it anymore because boric acid will vaporize and it will end up on your oven's door. Sure, you can just scrape it off and clean the oven, but because my kitchen's oven is something that I actually use to cook food, I didn't want to keep drying my kilns in it. The same thing will happen with your microwave, but I expect that you will get a dedicated microwave and you will not use the one in the kitchen. So as you can see, microwave kilns can be used for bigger things. Way bigger things.